Great. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sabrina Paganoni, and I am a physician researcher at Mass General Brigham. My main work is on clinical trials for ALS, so I work on developing new treatments for this disease, also known as Lou Gehrig disease. But also have a passion for developing assistive technology, specifically for people living with ALS, and so I collaborate with different colleagues throughout the Mass General Brigham system and Harvard to develop these tools tailored for people living with ALS. And today, I'm really delighted to be here with this distinguished panel of experts, and we are going to have a panel discussion on innovations in disability technology shaping a more accessible future. So we'll dive right into our discussion. I'll ask my panelists to introduce themselves as we get to the first questions. So I'm going to start with a topic that's relevant for all of us. Disability innovation is going to help all of us across the lifespan. So I'm going to start, Cheri, with you. So why is disability innovation important for everyone?
Sure, thank you. So great to see everyone. Thanks for attending our session. My name is Dr. Cheri Blauwet. I am currently the Senior Vice President and Chief Clinical Officer at the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. Spent many wonderful years here at Mass General Brigham. I'm a physician in physical medicine and rehabilitation, and I also had a first career as a Paralympic athlete in the sport of wheelchair racing, so have that as a unique aspect of my background as well. So, thank you, Sabrina, for that question. I think that part of the reason why we were excited to have this panel here at the World Medical Innovation Forum is to be able to relay to a broader audience the fact that disability innovation is not just focusing on or targeting a very small group of people, it's really for all of us. I think national and global statistics note a prevalence of disability as 1 in 4 Americans, 1 in 6 people internationally. Those estimates are likely low, and of course, disability is something that impacts everyone across the lifespan, particularly individuals as they age, and that of course is a global phenomenon. So what we're really starting to see is a more, I would say, prevalent and visible discussion around the concept of universal design and the concept that when we think about innovation targeting tools and technologies for people with disabilities, we're really talking about everyone in our population. And because of that, this is also an enormous market. So when you think about, well, who's going to be a customer or an end user of a specific technology or innovation, it's potentially anyone in this room, anyone at this whole event today, anyone in the city of Boston, and so on. So it's a huge market, a really exciting area of growth, and very excited to be able to foster this conversation today, Sabrina.
Thank you. So Hugh, I wanted to turn to you. You developed many groundbreaking technologies. And how do we shift the perception from these technologies being useful for a niche market to being universally relevant?
Yeah, great. Yeah, just as the field develops more and more tech that has profound efficacy and even augmentation qualities, you'll see the technology being used very, very broadly. One example is I co-founded a company called Defy, and Defy is developing motorized bionic shoes that can be used by anyone, whether an individual has a leg condition or not. So that with that type of scale, where the device has applications not only in sports and recreation, but also wellness and medical, you see a single technology that can be broadly used across society. So Defy was established out of my MIT lab, where I'm a professor, specifically in the MIT Media Lab.
Thank you. I'm sure you'll tell us more about your technologies. Gina, I want to ask you to tell us more about your perspective as an attorney and business woman. When you talk to clients or investors, what do you share about the disability innovation market? Why is it worth a large-scale investment?
Yes, thank you so much. And I am an attorney. Don't throw any tomatoes. This is like, among doctors. But the kind of attorney I was is kind of relevant in that I represented the interests of people with disabilities across the United States for a good many years as a civil rights lawyer. And, I was talking to Cheri earlier. We grew up before civil rights for people with disabilities. And there's a generation out there that came of age, were born after 1990, when we had the first civil and human rights statute to recognize the rights of people with disabilities. And they grew up with two phenomena that really created an inflection point for our whole society, which is the advent of civil rights and technology growing up together and creating what we call the ADA generation that has now arrived at the front door of work. Those kids, the ADA kids, are now 35 years old, and they are demanding more of their employers, of their institutions of higher education, of medical schools, of law schools. They're demanding more technology too. And instead of waiting for the technology to change, what we are seeing is the advent of makers and innovators and entrepreneurs with disabilities who are building the technology themselves. And part of what they're building is the very next generation of assistive technology that has not only an access lens, but a cultural lens and an economic lens that's driven from the grassroots up. And so I founded Enable Ventures, which is the first impact venture capital firm that invests in closing the disability wealth gap to back these founders and makers and innovators who are creating access technology that will inevitably change the way we all live.
Well, it's wonderful to see the diversity here in the speaker, and you bring such unique perspectives. Lily, I want to turn to you. So can you tell us more about your perspectives as an author, advocate? How do you frame the discussion? What's the best messaging to talk about, again, the universality of disability innovation?
Okay. I suppose I came to disability later in life in the sense that I was the parent of a now adult child with cerebral palsy. So, even though I was a medical scientist, I knew nothing about disability until my son was born. And then, he had cerebral palsy, and it's quite a complex condition because it changes as the child grows. So I knew nothing about it. And long after he had grown up and was gone to college, I decided to go back and write the book I had wanted when he was first diagnosed. And be careful what you do when you retire, because one book led to another book, and now I'm working with Gillette Children's Hospital on a series of 9 books on childhood-acquired disabilities, right? They're largely lifelong disabilities. And it's because there's no car manual when you have a child that's diagnosed with a condition. And we're all out there, working our careers and becoming parents. And, when a child is newly diagnosed with a disability, you really don't, there's no manual for that. And I wanted to write the book I had wanted. That was the first book I wrote. And all the proceeds from all books go to research. And it's led me to do a number of other things. But anyway, just getting back to what Cheri was saying, the WHO has now revised upward their estimate of the number of people in the world with disability. And they say that they estimate that 1.3 billion people worldwide have a significant disability. Now, they put significant, and that's 16% of the world's population. And I think none of us should think that, disability isn't, doesn't belong to other people. Hopefully, we'll all age. And disability is nothing to fear, because all of us will eventually, whether by accident, by aging, or by illness, may become disabled. And set myself a goal that I'll age long enough, that I will become old enough that, I may, that I get to that stage. And that's why I think universal design is so important. Like, we need to create products, environments, and systems that are accessible and usable by everyone, not just by people with disability, by everyone, because hopefully we will all reach the stage where we need these products, whatever. So, that we have these products, and that regardless of age, regardless of ability, regardless of background, that we can use without the need for adaptation.
Yeah, that's great. And everyone, please feel free to chime in anytime. We are talking about, emerging technologies, and I would like to ask each of you, I'll start with you, Hugh, to think about, what are the technologies that are emerging right now that hold the most promise? I mean, we all see the amazing advances of new technologies entering our daily lives. So what do you think is the next big thing?
Again, Hugh Herr from MIT. Just a comment to on what was stated already about technology scaling and being able to be used by most humans on the planet. I think there's a level of technological sophistication where a current technology platform becomes useful across all of humanity. If, for example, braces, or now called exoskeletons, we're at that threshold now in human history where before this, they were only assistive devices, but now they can actually, in some examples, augment all humans, whether you have a leg condition or not, as I mentioned before. So with that level of sophistication now, the tech can be advantageous for all humans if you have legs, whether they have a condition or not. So that would suggest, as we marched through this 21st century and the tech becomes more and more sophisticated, we're going to see this broad use of technology that was born with the focus of helping people with disabilities. The tech there will inform of future tech that everyone uses. What are technology areas that are really, really interesting? Connecting the brain to wearable devices is very, very exciting. My lab at MIT, we develop bionic limbs that talk to electronically to muscles and nerves, enable a person to think and to move the mechatronics, and to actually feel the mechatronics as part of the body through proprioception and touch, cutaneous sensations, closing the loop between the built device and the human nervous system. So that's very, very interesting, and it's setting a new point in history where a built device is no longer a tool, but is integrated into human physiology so intimately that it becomes human, it becomes part of self, where the technology becomes embodied. So very, very important time that we're now in.
Thank you. I actually see a little bit of that in my own work in the ALS clinic. The beauty of working in such a large medical system is that we get to collaborate with people, many of them at Harvard or MIT, that are developing some of these tools. And so there's a lot of collaboration in terms of having patients from our clinic go to the engineering lab and help, specifically in our case, with some exoskeletons that are being developed. That's been really great, and also some brain-computer interfaces that can benefit people with different conditions. I don't know, Gina, if I don't want to put you on the spot, but before we came here, we were talking about some changes in communication and assistive technology that we're both excited about. I don't know if you want to tell us more about that. I can share my experience too.
Well, there's so much, it's breathtaking what's happening day to day in the assistive technology space now. And you know why? Because when we used to, there are people in this audience that don't even know what assistive technology means because it has been obviated by the front door of tech. Assistive technology used to be a side lane or a separate alley of the technology market that generated point solutions for people with disabilities, oftentimes reimbursed by government systems, but othered nevertheless in the technology market. What we're seeing now is that we are pounding down the door to the front door of tech. And this is exactly to Hugh's point. We're seeing every day the future of speech, the future of cognition, the future of mobility, the future of memory, the future of all of these modalities of life. Now, question for the audience. That's not all we're seeing. We have often seen for the last 50 years in the technology market, people creating technology for the proverbial reasonable person, the proverbial average customer profile. And that customer never quite had a disability. And what we're trying to rectify right now in our conversations with each other, I can hear it, is what is responsible technology in an age of AI when things are moving like lightning speed? Is it smarter to build with or for people? And what we've found is that there's a generation of builders who are building with, and they're iterating and co-designing with the edge cases, with the hardest cases to solve, with the brain-computer interfaces, with the future of speech, with giving voice to people with ALS. But what they're also finding is that generating directionally in that direction, edge case, they're creating this powerful market penetration that's delivering value to the rest of society. That's not how the game went for the last 50 years. That's a record scratch. And what we're finding is that now capital is lining up to command attention and back founders that can vouch for whose fingerprints are on the technology, who is benefiting, what is the efficacy of the technology before it leaves the gate. This is really different. And it's not only an advancement in the technology market, but it's an advancement in the realization of rights, of human freedom.
Hard act to follow, Regina. No, I was just going to, point out a use case. When you asked your question, Sabrina, my mind went to one of the worlds that I work in, which is sports and recreation. And how, when we think about, people use different nomenclature, adaptive sport, parasport, Paralympic sport. But again, for so many years, we thought of this as a group of athletes and active individuals, a small niche, utilizing equipment that was often made by medical equipment companies. And what we've seen now is just this real explosion of thinking about universality and how we move and how we engage with the environment in a way that's totally different. One of my anecdotes is from my kids. So I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. And I see them growing up, and I see their worldview being formed day by day. And as their mom has a disability, they don't understand, like me and them and that othering. And so as they're growing up with me, like they said, well, can't I have a wheelchair? I was like, well, sure, right? Because they see it as a piece of mobility equipment. They see it like a skateboard or a bike, right? They don't see it as this piece of medical equipment that's only appropriate for a small group and in and of itself inherently stigmatizing and othering. So we're seeing that across, I think, different sectors, companies that make bikes extending into thinking about, like, how do you design a bike that works for literally every type of body, right? Every type of person, whether you control it with your legs or your arms or what have you. Same in like winter sports and people designing skis that you can control with a sip and puff mechanism. And I see that whole mindset evolving. For the most recent Paralympic Games, one of the main sponsors was Toyota. And no, I don't work for Toyota. I'm not putting in a plug. But the reason they sponsored the Paralympics was because they're trying to rebrand as a mobility company, not a car company. So they're really sort of seeing where that sector is going and understanding that we all move in different ways and the lines sort of blur between disabled and not disabled, right? We're just all getting around in the way that works for us, that gets us to point A to point B the quickest.
Just adding to that, Cheri, like I think the US Olympic and Paralympic movement, you know, the fact that they, you know, train together and that, like sort of the division between, you know, like why is there, so much separation?
That's
At least
right.
they're leading the way in bringing it together.
That's right, yep. Yeah, the athletes themselves are often driving that and don't see differences.
Yeah.
Yeah, there has been just to echo the comments, there has been a profound change in societal attitudes towards different bodies. I have a different body. I wear bionic limbs. I'm not biological from the knee down. And it used to be, you know, 2 decades ago when I went through an airport, people would see my legs and would, you know, the children would stare and the adults would look away. And people would be like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I was like, what are you sorry about? Today, when I go through the airport, I expose my legs, you know, so that when I go through the metal detector, I can go through quickly because it's so visible and I'm searched and go on. But it's common when I go through the airport that people run up to me and say, wow, those legs are cool. You know, can you run faster than any other human? That's amazing. That just didn't happen 20 years ago. So those changes in attitude about that different bodies are okay and that we can actually explore our dreams and passions and our expressions in society through a vehicle of very good technology, very good design. And that's powerful and beautiful and okay. So you couple that new framework with really exciting things happening in the tech domain. And those two ingredients, I think, are just causing an explosion in assistive technology.
That's great. I want to touch on the topic of access, because now we have many new technologies, hopefully many more to come. But how do we make them truly accessible? And I'm asking that also because we received a question from the audience. Thank you for asking the question. And the question specifically is access and investment for people with disabilities outside the US. So I wanted to ask you both domestically and kind of globally, how do we ensure that these new technologies receive the people that could benefit from them?
Should we all answer?
Sure.
Okay, I'll start. Yeah, I'm often asked in interviews, what's the #1 hurdle to innovation in the bionic space? And everyone expects me to say, oh, the batteries need to get better, or the actuators need to get better, or sensors. And what I say is it's reimbursement. It's the challenge of who will pay for the device. So the bionic limbs that I'm wearing were developed by my lab. I spun out a company. I get venture capital funding. I raised $60 million. And the US government decided not to cover them with a code. So they only, today, still only 15% of the US population that needs the devices have access. So that's, you know, that doesn't support a $60 million raise, and the company didn't do well, the product didn't do well. So that access issue of who will pay for technology is very, very dominant in our ability to innovate. What's the solution? We can have better reimbursement, better insurance policies for sure. We can also develop technologies, again, that are universal, that can be used by all of society, and that large market will drive down the price point so that it can be affordable without insurance. So there's several examples of that model being used. Outside the US, we have a program at MIT where we're building orthotic and prosthetic sectors within very poor regions of the world. We're now working in Western Africa and Sierra Leone. When we arrived, there was one clinician, and now we're educating the locals to be able to build their own prostheses and braces. We're building supply chain infrastructure and so on. So the long-term vision there is if you build up human and physical infrastructure wherever in the world, the local community can build their own medical device.
I'd add to that, like what we don't want to do is come from one inequity to another, that the novel technologies are only affordable by wealthier populations. You know what I mean? We've been there with inequity. We don't want a new one, definitely. And like it's sort of policies in terms of, you know, sort of that insurance cover, you know, subsidizing the costs of them, the distribution of them. And like we never can forget that you know, a great portion of disability is in low and middle income countries, you know what I mean? So really, you know, sort of, we have to be very mindful of that, you know, that it has to, you know, the technologies, we don't want them for just high income countries, we want them to be very equitably available across all the countries.
So I love this question, and I think that it's counterintuitive. I think we have somewhat of a colonial model when it comes to technology, where we think we have the best ideas and we'll export it around the world, and it's just not true, particularly for disability. In 2022, I was part of a group that announced at the Clinton Global Initiative that we had worked with 10 accelerators in 8 countries, led by people with disabilities, who were generating their own assistive technologies. And what that showed the world is that lying in plain sight are innovators everywhere. And they're generating new use cases for technology that's augmentative, that is assistive, and that is economically uplifting. And the only thing that is really conspicuously absent from those ecosystems is dedicated capital. And even that is now changing. And if anything, we are working in concert with investors around the world who are interested in this marketplace exactly because it's porous, exactly because it's universal. There is no difference between a blind screen reader or blind tech that's made in Bangalore than that which is made in Chicago. The difference of market rate return and what type of capital will take a company from 0 to 1 and what type of capital is necessary to correct market failures, that's a whole other conversation. But in terms of the technology itself, it has great vitality wherever it's born on planet Earth, and there are people building right now all over the world. And I think that is also a product of civil and human rights globally. Where we are really seeing the 1.5 billion people with disabilities really taking leadership positions and saying, I want the future of technology to be different. I want to be a part of it, this wave, this coming wave of AI in particular. I was left out of the last round of the internet revolution. I don't want to be left out now, and I'm building. And I think we're seeing that all over the world. It's really a different day.
Yeah. Well, I concur with what's been said so far, and I think what I would add is simply coming back a little bit to some of the points that Hugh made around the sort of avenues, right? So we have technologies and tools that are developed because they simply work, and they work for a large swath of the population, including people with disabilities. And those products might make it to Amazon or whatever place where you can easily buy them or acquire them, but they make life more functional for everyone. And then you also have, of course, a group of people with disabilities who do need customized, highly precision-oriented tools in order to fully engage in society, fully live their life with the highest quality of life. Things like custom prosthetics, things like custom wheelchairs. And I think for so long within this medical infrastructure, which does have to exist, I'm all for, I like to bring things out of the medical model whenever possible, because I think it's more innovative, it's more forward thinking. But we do need to still have, a functional system within the medical model to serve the needs of individuals who acquire significant new illnesses or injuries that lead to disability and therefore require equipment. And one thing that I've seen is that even within that medical infrastructure, we still other the tools that people with disabilities need. And, I think there's no one here at this conference center today who would say that to some extent our system isn't broken, right? There are a lot of problems with our health system, and this whole concept of insurance reimbursement, the way it works, so many challenges. But we're still in this place where we have not yet truly shown that the outcomes for individuals do improve, and ultimately we enhance outcomes, quality of life, and lower costs if we get people the equipment that they need to live a full life without putting them at higher risk for things like secondary conditions. So again, one example that I always point to is how, and I am a wheelchair user, so this is my blend of lived experience and professional experience. But if you want to, me as an active person, if I want to be able to have a wheelchair that's custom fit for me, that's lightweight, that will enable me to, work and not develop secondary conditions related to my skin and my shoulders, et cetera, I can't actually get that. I can get a lower cost model that would make it more likely for me to acquire those secondary conditions, and I can't just pay extra for the nicer model, rather it's not covered at all. And so, I think it just goes to the point of needing to get more people with lived experience, more moral leaders with disabilities in those sectors, thinking about how this whole system flows of healthcare in America, because I think it needs to be disrupted completely. It's pretty broken at this point, and we still see adaptive equipment in that sector as like a nice thing to have rather than something that's central to function, health, and quality of life.
Cheri, I would just add, to that in the sense of when we probably didn't emphasize enough co-design, with the novel technologies that co-design is so important, that people with disabilities are at the table in the design, but also in all the policies, that they're informing all the policies so that there aren't silly examples like you say, you know what I mean? Like that people with disabilities, with the lived experience, need to be at the table across the board and not to be shy to join the table.
So we are receiving many questions, so thank you so much for sending all these questions, and you answered many of them in different ways. One thing that, and I'll try to lump a couple of comments here, people are asking, what's the innovation that will scale the fastest over the next 5 years? And another person actually asked, for example, automatic cars, in part, were developed to increase access or ease of use, and what other innovation that maybe is born out of the disability world will actually scale and become available the fastest? Yeah.
Just something that immediately comes to mind is we've been hearing about physical AI, and so this forthcoming humanoid revolution. One point is a prosthetic knee. The design constraints and requirements of a prosthetic knee are the same as a humanoid knee. So again, if this humanoid revolution occurs, and everyone has a humanoid in their home doing chores, with that type of extraordinary scale, the powered prostheses and braces will just use hardware that are being mass produced from the humanoid space, and for augmentation of humans with body differences. Right now, my ankles are roughly $50,000 US. With that scale, you could have a biomimetic robotic ankle for $400, right? And I could just bring out my wallet and pay for it. I don't even need insurance. So that type of scale is going to hit hard. And it's going to be a wonderful secondary impact of the physical AI revolution.
This is interesting because I'm going to ask Hugh a question based on his comment to the question. So to what extent is it necessary, actually, that founders with disabilities and those in your lab or those building with you would create what you think is the responsible version of that prosthetic in order to directionally influence Palantir or others that are making the humanoids, as opposed to the humanoids influencing the prosthetics?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I understand the question. So the designing, going back to my example, designing a prosthetic robotic knee is a design problem with many, many constraints. It has to be quiet. A person with above an amputation doesn't want to come in a movie theater and sound like a screeching robot. On a single power supply, it has to go at least a full day. It has to be biomimetic in its shape. Has to be able to output human-like dynamics. Turns out those same design constraints exist for a humanoid knee, right? So this is an example where a bionic designer such as myself, I have a lot to say on how a humanoid should be designed. And so I think prosthetics will inform humanoid design. So
Bingo. No, but I think this is the conversation we should be having in public, because I think very few people are thinking about where these designs are coming from and where they're emanating from, and what would be the hardest test that you could run on efficacy would be the prosthetic test,
100%.
Not the other way around.
100%.
And I think that's the direction I see things going in.
Yeah, broadly, what is Bionics? Bionics is a two-way arrow. The classic way of doing Bionics that goes back to Da Vinci and before Da Vinci is to deeply understand biological nature, to extract principles, and use those principles to design things out of synthetic or biologic constructs. So human Bionics is a deep understanding of who we are, how we move, how we think, how we feel, how we sense, informing design. That's a very powerful model to develop technology that's very broadly applicable, technology that actually works, that's not deeply frustrating, technology that's agrees with and is congruent with who we are as humans. So it's not surprising that in many areas, as has been stated in this panel, that bionic design will drive technology that will be used by all.
Great. I can see that this conversation is generating a lot of interest, and I see that from more and more questions that are coming in. We have less than 1 minute, but I would encourage everyone who asked a question was not, could not be answered to come up to the podium afterwards, and I'll just ask each of you to close with maybe some concluding thoughts on, what are you hopeful for, the next 5 or 10 years? What do you think is going to be the next development?
Sure. Well, I'll be a bit provocative. I think what I would hope for, and why I was so excited to be a part of this panel today, is that I would hope for this type of topic to draw, thank you all for being here, but to draw 1,000 people in the audience, because we understand, and the innovation sector understands really the point that Gina and Hugh just made, right? That what we're learning through disability innovation has such tremendous power and broad applicability that, you're missing the boat if you're not on the boat, so jump on. And that this type of content and this type of discussion becomes even more prevalent and common within medical innovation and non-medical innovation discussions and forums.
Yeah, I think similarly, I would like to entreat you all to get in a fight with someone about this topic over the next couple of days, because, you know, pick an argument, talk to folks about what their understanding of disability is. It is an all of society issue, and it involves all of us. And if we really want to future-proof our society, we will be talking about not just our current state, but our future state, where the prevalence of disability, the identification of disability is rising in younger people, and people are living longer. It is inevitable that you will age into disability. And as it applies to technology, it has everything to do with it. We are at a crossroads where we're being called upon to decide whether technology should emulate humans, and who should be the driver in deciding what it is to be human. And that's part of the conversation in this innovation sector, is that we think that putting human-centered design at the heart of why technology is built and not the other way around is going to create social benefits that we have not even begun to contemplate. So it's a very unique opportunity to join a technology and innovation market with great optimism towards the future.
Regina's putting the challenge to everybody to go out there and have a row in the next few days. I love it. Like, obviously, I would say that that disability innovation, it's universal design, you know, absolutely. And that these novel technologies are both affordable and are everywhere. That's what I would like 10 years.
Just finish with a set of thoughts. Steve Jobs said the bicycle, the computer is the bicycle of the human mind. I love that quote, because I view the bicycle as one of the greatest inventions in human history. The bicycle truly benefits the human. A person can go much faster on a bicycle than on their own two legs. And also, a person doesn't degrade when they ride a bicycle. In fact, they get stronger, they get healthier, right? Too many of our technologies degrade who we are. They're not good for our minds, they're not good for our bodies. So my wish is that we see a revolution in design, where we actually ask the question, how do we have technology truly serve humanity? Technology that'll make us better. What is human-powered AI? What is an AI that would actually make us smarter? What does that look like? These are the questions we should be asking.
Well, there's no better way to end the session. Thank you for this inspiring conversation, and thank you for being here, everyone. Thank you.